if tomorrow the roads were just worse and everyone had to wake up half an hour earlier to get to work or do whatever it is they wanted to, in theory, this should result in a GDP increase because there'll be more petrol consumed, there'll be more punchers that have to be repaired. If you have nannies or other services, you'll have to pay more for that. So, on paper, the GDP has gone up, but everyone is just more miserable. If you're in some world situation or life situation where your parents are ill, your kids hate you, they're struggling at school, your spouse has gone away, then I really don't think going and flying business class is going to fix any of these problems, right?
Ticket to Centre Court in Wimbledon costs maybe 2,500 to 5,000 pounds per season or something like that. But a person who really likes tennis and who's had this ambition for years to go there, it's Centre Court down there, out there, we can see the players, sweat trickling from their faces. That is Wimbledon. Otherwise you could watch it on TV. And if it's a once in a lifetime experience, well, it's once in a lifetime experience. You should do this.
Why on earth would you even bother taking a higher risk if you can't get a higher return?
Opening your mind out to saying it's only 10 lakhs, I'll figure out how to get that 10 lakhs and I'll do it 5 years down the line, not today.
Investment manager or a fund manager comes to me, my first reaction is, boss, let's not have this conversation, just give me an IRR. But they're like, no, I need to know more about what's going on and what you're really aiming for. How do you deal with this tension?
My real problem really is that I'm intimidated by finance. This is a well-known issue, I think, from the perspective of people who are looking at the IRR part of the equation.
I mean, you keep talking about winning at life, and I guess the question here is, does money really help you win in so many of these cases?
Yes, you should invest, yes, you should save, but you should also keep in mind that the end goal is to be happy and comfortable in your life, and that money is just an enabler of those comforts. So we want you to focus on the comforts that will make you happy rather than just the money itself.
Deepak, it is widely accepted that GDP is a poor overall measure of a country's well-being. I think I remember reading this booklet called Mismeasuring Our Lives some decade or so ago, where they said, look, if tomorrow the roads were just worse and everyone had to wake up half an hour earlier to get to work or do whatever it is they wanted to, in theory, this should result in a GDP increase because there'll be more petrol consumed, there'll be more punchers that have to be repaired. If you have nannies or other services, you'll have to pay more for that. So on paper, the GDP has gone up, but everyone is just more miserable. And I think we all accept this. But the fact of the matter is that the moment you try to venture beyond GDP and create some national dashboard of wellness or happiness, like some countries have tried, it becomes so subjective and so political that you realize that that is a far worse solution. And for all its faults, GDP is the best and only real measure that we have. It kind of correlates to what you're looking to measure eventually. So with that as the backdrop, I think when it comes to money management or fund management, every time someone comes to me and says something other than their returns or other than their IRR or whatever, I start getting nervous. I'm a bit suspicious and wary. I think that they're trying to distract from a poor performance or do some expectations management on me. And instead of like trying to justify or tell me what they can get from me, they're asking me, what do you want? And I'm like, look, I get it. If I get into an Uber or an auto, I'm not supposed to ask the person where I want to go. I'm supposed to tell them where I want to go. But how do you deal with this fact that when an investment manager or a fund manager comes to me, my first reaction is, boss, let's not have this conversation. Just give me an IRR. But they're like, no, I need to know more about what's going on and what you're really aiming for. How do you deal with this tension?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting tension to deal with because I think maybe it stems from the fact that there are many hats that a financial person is expected to don. And I've seen that. I was a computer engineer when I came out of college, and people around me assume that Deepak is a computer engineer, so he knows everything about computers and he knows everything about engineering. So therefore, he needs to fix my printer because it's not working. And he also needs to fix my car because, look, you got an engineering degree, something about cars is good. So at some point that was a little perplexing because as a computer engineer, you don't really get the skills to even fix a printer or even run properly computer programs nowadays because it's like you learn like I learned Fortran and COBOL, which maybe I saw like 2% off in my real life. But apart from that, this multifunctionality layer of it has been a concern, but we've solved it in some cases. For instance, When you go to a general physician today, that's your one point solution of, oh, I have a headache, I have this thing. But the minute it becomes into, I have a neurological problem, you're going to go to the neurologist. You're going to go to, if you have issues that I hope you never have, but a pediatric oncologist and all that stuff. So I think the difference in professional knowledge has been kind of identified, saying this person is this person is this. That's why we have AI engineers now, prompt engineers and context engineers and so on. So you pretty much are talking to different layers. But in the financial planning world, a lot of things are expected to be done by the person who is in finance. So if you have problems with your taxes, you'll say, oh, what's a tax saving opportunity that I can use? And you'll talk to a fund manager in the same way and saying, can I save some taxes? Can I do this? And then you're getting the crux of this whole financial knowledge that you want from this one person, whose idea is to, of course, manage returns. But the financial manager also realizes that it's a problem for you, because there are two things that we've realized that people have, and they're intimidated by finance. So for them, the IRR return is a very simple number. 13% is greater than 12. I understand that. The second kind of person is perhaps it's a philosophical problem. Too often, people are intimidated also for, which is number one, also because they don't have an inclination to know finance in any meaningfully deep way, right? So they're more like, listen, I understand money is a useful thing to have, but can I just not worry about this stuff, right? Can somebody else worry about this stuff for me and take care of it? I just need someone trustworthy. I need someone who can do the right thing. I don't have any other way to measure them right now other than returns, because I don't understand this field deep enough. But at some level, I think just getting the highest returns, going to the person with the highest returns will solve my problem. And my real problem really is that I'm intimidated by finance. This is a well-known issue, I think, from the perspective of people who are looking at the IRR part of the equation. But I think it's a fundamental issue, because if you go to a fund manager who's managing, say, a gold fund, and say, should I invest in gold? You're going to say, yes, you should invest in gold. You're going to hear that. That's simply because the person is, it's like asking a barber if you want a haircut and so on. But the issue really is that I think you have a greater problem when it comes to something around finance. So I think you need those, a little bit of more of an understanding of, I understand where you are, where you're coming from, but I want to give you a little more perspective on what the overall financial world can offer you, and then really solve the second problem, which is that you really need someone to take care of this so that you don't have to worry about it anymore, and at the same time have a more peaceful financial life while doing what else you need to do, and you're winning at life in different ways. You should continue to do that to and let the finances build up in the background, and while someone has your back. Can I make you less intimidated by finance by making things so simple that you can actually create value in the person's head by saying, listen, oh, if it's that simple, then I can do it. So the people who are looking for IRR, who I don't think a conversation like this can ever help, because what we're really saying is, listen, we want you to win at life in a more meaningful way. And just looking at IRR is not going to solve that problem. So we need a bigger, larger thing to look at. So the three kinds of people I will never be able to kind of have this discussion with ever would be a person who has no money at all. So they have too little money. And that little money, they just want the highest return off, because they're like, oh, I need to make this. So I give you 10,000 rupees. Can you make it 1 lakh? Person has come to me always and said, many times, and said, listen, I have this massive problem of, I need to pay a bunch of people by the end of the month, 1 lakh. I have 50,000. Can you double it? So the correct answer is no, of course. But the problem is that they're looking at the impossible, because my answer to them is, well, earn more money or buy more time. There's only two ways to hang or do this. Don't expect your returns to kind of meet this shortfall. But I cannot help that, because at this point, asking them for life gyan is more like useless. The second kind of person is people who already reached that point where they have enough money and they're living their life well. So if I tell them, listen, you should aspire to be X and should aspire to have a holiday like this and so on, um, that sounds meaningless to them because they're like, I can do that already. Why are you telling me all this? Just tell me about your returns. That makes sense because then they're at that stage of life. The idea is to preserve a part of their capital and grow another part of their capital, and they're kind of doing that. So having a life goals kind of win at life by doing better things kind of conversation is more philosophical and not useful to them. The only caveat here is, I would say, and we'll go through a bunch of things over here, is that oftentimes people who have a lot of money just don't know how to spend it. And sometimes you can open their eyes in that recognition, but this is the opposite of investment. It's almost like saying, don't invest, you have enough money, please go and spend. I love to have that discussion simply because I think their lives will simply be more meaningful if they spend that money in the right way, rather than just to try to think of avenues to invest it in. So, leave those aside. They're not the people who want their planning to happen. The third kind of person is a person who is a constant tinkerer. Now, we've all been this person. At some point in time, we all constantly tinker with our portfolio saying, oh, well, you know what, this is not doing well, let's get into this. This is doing well, let's go here, and so on. So when you need that constant tinkering that's happening in your life, the life goals abstraction seems to be a waste of time. Because almost like I'll figure out the goals with myself, just keep getting me the highest returns possible. It is usually a few cycles of this. It takes maybe you're not 20 or 25, or you're actually reached the point where you're 30 and 30 plus, and where you're saying, I've done this tinkering stuff for a few years. I don't have enough money to say I can do whatever I want, but I have enough money to not be like penniless or close to it. When there is enough money and I have places to go, things to take care of, and things like that, how do I now look at my financial life? And this is intimidating. Somebody please figure it out for me and give me a window that I can build a framework for which I can put my finances into. Because once you put that into a nice little framework, and framework is often used as a bad word nowadays, but I still think it's useful to say, once you've tackled the problem, it's ring fenced in your head and you don't have to worry about it constantly anymore. Whereas if you don't, you're always confused about, hey, there's a new big thing coming, can I invest in that? SpaceX shares available in the private part of the market through an Amsterdam vehicle that invests in so should I do that? They're asking me only 5,000 rupees. Maybe I can do that. Maybe 10,000 rupees. Can I do 5,000? The minute you get into these kind of things, you're losing the larger picture of, do you know why you need a specific investment in your life in the first place? You have no idea it'll go up or down. That's a different thing. But the attractiveness was only returns. And this 5,000 or 10,000 is not even the question. The problem should have been, if it was, should I invest 5 lakh rupees in this? Because it's only for people at that level should they be thinking of such things. And if you're not at that level, you should not perhaps be thinking of these things. There are other things to think of before this. I believe that there is such a thing as a good life, not the best life you can lead. I mean, I think there's different things for different people. But the good life is simply something that you should aspire for, that says, well, money can enable that and I can take care of it. And by the way, if money can't enable it, I'm not the right person to have that conversation, because there are things that money, maybe it's not money that changes those things. But I think if you get to that point where you ring fence your finances, that becomes a great enabler for you to then put context of this IRR to. Otherwise, I always say suspect the higher IRR, extremely high IRR. Somebody comes and tells you, I'll double your money in 15 days, which may be precisely what anybody would want. I would like my money doubled in 15 days. But the chances that you will get gypped when you buy a doubling your money phenomenon is so high that anybody who has been gypped a few times by this, or has had friends gypped like this, is almost like, listen, no, I'm going to suspect you. So, and I bring that down to anything that is more than, say, 12 to 15% kind of returns, is almost like, come on, are you for real? Because you want to be careful of over statement of those returns. So your framework helps you define that. Once you get to that framework, you're almost like, okay, this does not sound right because it doesn't fit in here. So I'm going to use you for entertainment rather than for anything else. But more importantly, The framework is out there, and I can always fit things into that framework when I get the right kind of investments. That is the reason why I think the financial planners keep thinking, build your framework. So do you want a large cap fund? The other guy's like, should I have a large cap? I don't know. So like, oh, wait, you need to build a framework first. And that's the reason why perhaps the fund managers probably talk about this stuff so much.
Well, Deepak, that's all well and good, but I think it's easier for me today to find a nutritionist and get dietary advice than, even if I don't need one, to then otherwise go and find a financial planner. Where are all these financial planners? I mean, I don't seem to have found many. I've had a few people who've had interactions with them, and it hasn't always been as favorable as you've been saying, because the fact is sometimes you have to get them all this data. They don't have the infrastructure to process all your information. They're not familiar with, say, international holdings or something of that sort. And then we've had issues where people have come to us after speaking to financial planners, and the financial planners have told them, you can't afford this. And they're like, but why not? I want this. Or the opposite, where the financial planner is, you should be doing this per year. And the person's like, I don't want to do this. I mean, so it ends up almost in this argumentative situation with a financial planner. I guess there are online tools. I remember playing with a few of them back in the day, but they're all fairly limited. Maybe ChatGPT can solve this. But you're saying financial planning is a critical exercise and you should create these frameworks. But where are the financial planners, I mean, out there, and why aren't they out there? And in a world where they aren't out there, how do I make use of someone whose job is actually something else to help me with this problem?
Yeah, no, you're right. Incidental advice seems to be what all of us seem to be getting, right? Because incidental means I'm not paying for the advice itself, I'm paying for something else, but there's someone knowledgeable enough in the subject. And that's because financial planning is a complex exercise, simply because personal finance is personal. Every person is not the same. The issue is, and we'll go to different groups of people and we'll try to kind of analyze what it means to be financially secure and all that stuff. But people are different. So it's often very difficult to put everybody into the same kind of buckets. And you need to modify, need to change things often. Now, if somebody comes to you, and this is a problem that anybody has, right? Somebody comes to me and says, Deepak, I'm not getting, my portfolio has returned only 6% in the last 2 years. So, we need to fix this. So it's natural that I'm thinking his problem is returns. His problem is not financial life and all that, right? So he's like, oh, okay, what do you have? Oh, this is the stuff that's giving you really bad returns, and these sound like really bad investments. Can we move them to something else and good and all that? So I'll take a bunch of funds and I'll say, oh, there's a volatility calculator and spread and IRR and Sharpe ratio and all the complex terms we have. And then you can say, oh, well, you know what? This is the thing you can do to improve your returns. But the real probable financial answer is, wait a second. Can you tell me a little bit more about your life? What is this investment you've made, and why have you made it, and when have you made it, and what is your overall portfolio look like? I mean, do you have assets? Do you have loans? Do you have kids? Do you have parents to take care of? Do you need something in the near future versus you can plan for something in 10 years or 15 years? When do you plan to retire? All of these things is required in order to make a plan, because if you do that, then you're almost like trying to look at this stuff in the context of the person's overall financial life. If these stocks or these funds or these investments were only 1% of your overall wealth, and you're telling me that it's given you a 6% return, I can actually tell you, listen, if I gave you something that gave you a 100% return, this portfolio is not going to change your life, because your 1% will become 2% and then nothing. It's like, I often get people who say, Deepak, I invested in this IPO and I made a lot of money, and stock doubled. So I'm looking at him saying, so how much do you invest? And because that IPO is fully subscribed or oversubscribed, so at max you would have got one lot. So he's like, I got that one lot. So I'm like, okay, that's 15,000 rupees. You doubled it and became 30,000 rupees. You're worth 1.5 crores. Can you please look at the 15,000 rupees that you made as profit? In the context of 1.5 crores, this does nothing. This is the equivalent of a person, telling me he can drink one more coffee a day. So it changes your life, not meaningfully, and perhaps the person should be drinking the coffee, but that's a different point. But it doesn't change. So the meaningfulness of that 1% is lost unless you're almost like telling him, why didn't you invest a lot more money? The answer, of course, is he can't, because so many other people wanted to. But he could have bought the stock after the IPO, and then it could have maybe gone only 30% from there, or 10% from there, 12% from there. And then he would have still made more meaningful money. So getting 10% of a 5 lakh rupee investment is greater than doubling your 16,000 rupee investment, simply on the basis that the absolute amount of money is more meaningful, right? So the problem is that now, if you're in that situation where a financial planner has to do all this work for you, the model sucks, because the poor fellow, whoever the financial planner is going to ask you for all this data. And you're right in that online data input and stuff like this sucks, because especially if you have 4 houses, what's the price of the house? I don't know. What's the price I bought it at? Yeah, roughly this. But did you spend so much on interiors? Oh yeah, I spent so much on interiors. But what were the registration fees? Oh, it's this much. You pay the broker something? Yeah, we include all of that. Then have you been on a loan, buying this on a loan? So the true cost of the house is now the loan plus the interest cost of the loan as well. So that's the how much the house really costs, right? And what's it worth right now is another phenomenon. So you're almost like, okay, I'm going to have to balance all this. You put all this together. You get all the stocks. They have the financial investments, insurance details. And then you draw a little map of their financial life. Now, the financial planner has done more work in the first 15 days than he might ever do for this person for the rest of his life. And yet, the answer that comes out of something like this can be as simple as, listen, you need to make more money. You're not going to retire at this rate. It could be that, listen, what you've done is fantastic. You have a PF, you have this, you have an SIP going on in some funds, you have an insurance policy. You're doing fine. It could be as simple as, no, you need to make these small changes and the rest of it is kind of good enough. And the more meaningful one, which we all expect, is, oh, change everything. You guys, you've just been doing the wrong thing all your life. Here's what you should change. And this is the equivalent of a nutritionist coming in and usually telling you everything you've eaten so far is going to kill you. So I'm going to give you things that are less likely to kill you, but they will help you lead a better life. This is what you want to hear from a nutrition, because you're almost like, oh man, this is why I went to the nutrition. If the nutritionist tells you you're doing fine, you're eating the right things, just eat one more apple a day and you're fine, you're almost like, is the person really qualified? I mean, what the hell? I just gave them a list of like literally calorie level things of everything I have done in my life, and all they're telling me is eat one more apple a day. So the financial planner was pretty much like, you're fine. It's going to get no bhav in that sense. And what happens is, for the ordinary person, I'm taking a person who can perhaps, whose net worth is maybe 5 or 10 lakhs, the max they will pay a financial planner is maybe 10,000 rupees a year. And to a person who wants to be a financial planner, he can get maybe 200 such people, because it takes a day for everybody per year, right? So 200 people is your max. They're paying you 10,000 rupees a year. They want to hear great things. That's a different problem to have. But assuming that's the thing, that caps your income to about 20 lakh rupees per year. For a financial planner who's actually capable of going down this level and actually doing things, he will earn more being an executive at a fund or a brokerage than the 20 lakhs that he'll earn from doing all this work and getting these 200 customers, right? So one of the reasons why you get incidental advice is that there is a person who's earning from you in a different way. He may be a distributor of financial products. He may be an insurance person, but he may be a banker, which you have to meet the banker anyways. Or he may be your accounts person. Now, typically the accountant, the CA that you hire, might be a person who already knows enough about your financial life and who's able to tack on this incidental extra advice, saying, listen, yeah, you can do this also. This is a good thing to have in your portfolio, which then gives you the confidence that, okay, well, he's doing the right thing, but he's not charging me anything for it. So I'm not going to have to pay him that 10,000 rupees, but he's taking this 10,000 or maybe even 30,000 rupees for his main other service. And he's doing this alongside it there. I think to a large extent people, and this is a problem that I've had, is that people mostly try to accumulate wealth for wealth itself. Like you said, don't worry about my money, I'll figure it out. You just, but they're actually doing the wealth for wealth itself. There's a person who says, I want your wealth so I can buy real estate. Real estate is also wealth. So they want more wealth so they can have more wealth. So it's buying a stock so that I can buy more stocks. So if I make a profit, what will I do with the money? I will buy more stocks. I want to question this thing and saying, listen, you tell me a thing that you think was not that great. And not that great as in you weren't able to afford it and you probably thought you would never be able to afford it. But I think if you did a little bit of work, you can get there. I give you an example, and this is me. I never used to like this concept of, or I thought this concept of traveling in business class was ridiculous, in the sense that even if I had a lot of money, I will never travel business class because look, it's 5 times and you're just traveling from point A to point B. Just live with the economy wala situation for a while and all that. Maybe a ticket costs 1.5 lakhs to go to the US today. And this is because I booked some tickets recently on economy, and that's about 1.5 lakhs. The same ticket is 5 lakh rupees to go to the US and back in business class. Now, the earlier me was more like, I will, if it costs 1.5 versus 5, I will never spend the 5. I will do. But I think if I make the 5 irrelevant in my life, or I plan for the 5, I can make the 5 happen. And that 5 may grow up by inflation or something like that. But in my 20s, my thought process around how these things work was different. But in my 50s, it's not quite the same, right? I've changed my aspirations. And in order to, and one of the reasons I have is because I'm thinking, if it's 5 lakh rupees once a year, I just have to get to a point where I can afford it. It's not for the, to show photographs to the world that I am flying business class. I don't care about that. It's not the social validation that helps me anymore. But I think I will enjoy myself more. One thing that happens with business class and is that you get reclining seats, so you can sleep, which you can't in economy, right? I mean, you can't lie flat. The difference is you wake up fresh. So you go to a holiday for 7 days. You're not spending 2 days recovering from the aching pains that you get through this exercise. And then, on the way back, you get another 2 days off, right? So you're going to enjoy your holiday a little bit more. Yes, it costs a lot of money, but money is just a tool to get your holiday to be a little more pleasurable. Money is a tool that said, oh, well, that extra 3.5 lakhs gave you 2 days of that holiday. And maybe tomorrow, when you think back about the holiday, those 2 days will be invaluable in your life, in your own life. I think you can do this with almost every aspect of your life, where there are things that you want to do, but you've always been intimidated by the fact that it costs so much money, perhaps almost disgusted that people can charge so much money for something and never do this, because you were wedded more to the money that you had rather than the thing that you want to do. If you say that this thing that I want to do is the thing that I want to do, the money is just a means to get there. If it means more money, I'll find the way to get that more money. That is a simpler way to say, I will do this thing the way I want to do it. And it could be as simple as, I like restaurants. I want to go to good restaurants and eat good food. Some of these restaurants are far away, perhaps not accessible to me right now because I don't have the money to get there. But I can get to a stage in my life where I can. And I'm not going to judge anything for any of these things. But what I believe is the word extravagant, which was in my vocabulary a long time back, is no longer as relevant today. So I think extravagant is fine. And there's a different thing for it, because I think planning for your quality of life is better. It doesn't mean you eat Maggie today. I think winning at life does not mean winning at the fag end of your life, right? It's like you got to win through your life. And too many times people get so involved in the planning and the saving and the wealth creation part of things that they don't really think of the usage of that wealth. So when instead of thinking that the usage of the wealth will only come at the end, you think of it throughout your life. And it's easy to bucket and compartmentalize. And once you bucket and compartmentalize, you find that you have enough money left to enjoy your life, even now and also in the future. That is when I think it becomes meaningful. And the reason I say this today is because we're no longer living in a land where everybody is living hand to mouth. Maybe 20 or 30 years ago, there were a lot more people who were just about making enough to survive. Then you're almost like, what goals, what business class? I can barely even travel economy, right? So here you have these choices, and you've come to a world where these choices have become more apparent. Even for someone who's even 25 or 20 or 30 years old, the choices become apparent. And it means that at some point you just have to imbibe that philosophy that says extravagance in the old world is not necessarily a bad thing, even if I do it. But as long as I'm not doing it for social validation, I mean, you're doing for social validation at some point, that gives you some layer of happiness. But I feel that's more fleeting than truly believing in it, yourself. If you make your plan and work towards it, then all that stuff like risk returns comes into play. Uh, if this plan requires me to get 40% returns, it's a stupid plan. It's never going to work. If it needs 13%, well, maybe it'll work. Then I have the ability to say, is it long enough horizon for it to work, the 13%? If it needs only 5% for it to work, hell yes, it's going to be a fantastic thing to plan for. And you don't know this until you make the plan. Whereas, I mean, like for instance, my kids turn 18, it's a different age, different years. But when they do, I know there will be a point at which travel will become easier simply because you don't have to worry about their schools and stuff like that, right? So they'll go to their colleges and they'll be more independent. So that travel plan can only happen when they turn 18. But when that does happen, because it's so relatively far away, I can plan for a more luxurious holiday than I can afford today, simply because I have 5 years to plan that out. Like for instance, you don't want to, if you have kids who are 5 years old, you don't want to plan for their higher education so that the money is available to you tomorrow. You just want it to be available when you're 18 years old. That means it gives you smaller amounts of money to save today to get to the point where you have enough money when they're 18. That means not only are you winning at life when your child turns 18 and you have enough money to not need a loan for their education, you're also winning at life today.
Deepak, I'd like to challenge this in two ways. The first is that whether you actually need like a goal or a plan to figure out how to invest your money. Like, do you need a target and without it you're going to be lost, or can you just invest well? And the second one is, do you need money to unlock these wins or these winning at lives in the first place? So on the first one, the fact of the matter is that life is complicated. You're giving this example of how many years ago the thought of flying business class was this absurd extravagance that you never wanted to bother baking into your plans. And today you've seen that with some planning you can pull it off. Well accepted. But now let's add that layer of like discovery to each of your life goals. There's, I don't know, the kids' education, which you've talked about. There's, I guess, one day these kids could get married and you may have to pay for that as well. There's your own retirement. Then there's healthcare. God knows how much that's going to cost in the future and whether your insurance will be effective or not. So given how complicated each one of these are and how there's going to be a path of discovery or unknowns on each of these when you come to it, is it truly worth making a plan when there's so much that just cannot be planned for? And second, I mean, you keep talking about winning at life. And I guess the question here is, does money really help you win in so many of these cases? Because there are many wins that have nothing to do with money. I don't know, thinking like excelling at some exam, marrying someone you like, or whatever. All these things seem to be very personal. I mean, the fact of the matter is that if you're in some world situation or life situation where your parents are ill, your kids hate you, they're struggling at school, your spouse has gone away, then I really don't think going and flying business class is going to fix any of these problems, right?
I wish, but yeah, you're right. And let me answer the first one. I mean, why do you need financial planning when there's a ever-changing set of goals and ever-changing set of priorities in place? But I think the changing set of priorities, perhaps the same priority taking on different hues. I started when I was planning for my older son's education. I was planning for an education in India. And then eventually I said, well, and now I can plan to afford an education anywhere in the world. So it took a little bit of change. But the point was since I had a plan, I could just modify it and say, how much more do I need now? And then, plan to get there. The same thing applies on holidays. So if I said a holiday cost me maybe 2 lakhs today, it probably will cost me 5 lakhs tomorrow when I suddenly get this business class thing. Right? Because you once you fed into that thing, you almost like, oh, this is such a big upgrade that I don't want to deny myself the change. It's not like I won't fly economy, but it's like if I want to plan, let me plan for the right thing. I would say at this point, the idea of generating wealth for the sake of just having wealth blinds you to the possibilities of how you can use it meaningfully in your life. Your idea of winning at life often gets then blurred because if you spend that money, you take away from the identity that you're wealthy, because you've associated your being wealthy to a certain amount of money. If you spend that money, you no longer have that money, and now you become less wealthy and less in your own eyes because you've measured yourself in wealth of money rather than wealth of experiences. Whereas I feel that if you have spent the money to get the experiences, you're having that extra notch of experiences on your calendar is greater than having the money, because we're not going to take it with us, etc., etc., etc. But there is a greater impact to the whole thing. Not only do you, I mean, of course, don't look at this as objective, but I'm just saying there's a downstream impact as well. When you think of this spending nature of things, you're actually in some way perhaps even benefiting society downstream. It's a downstream impact to, with the level one, of course, is that society will be benefited if you save your money in a bank or a fund, and the fund will go and give the money to a budding entrepreneur who will then go out and change some things. And yeah, of course, that's true. But people have to have someone to sell to in the first place, because you can't just go around giving money to a banker who gives a loan to an industrialist who siphons the money off and puts it in an offshore haven, and he gets the yachts that you should have been traveling in, because it was your money that kind of funded this whole exercise. And as long as you're saving and spending money, he gets to buy more yachts, but you never get the yachts. Versus if you got the yacht, if you went and hired a yacht for a week, you would get the yacht. A bunch of people would get jobs, and you probably are better off than having done that saving business in the first place, because you might have money left at the end of it, whereas in the first case you might not. I mean, just, I'm not saying that it's always a negative sum game, but I'm just saying it's a different way to approach that problem, because people often get uh, unhappy about other people spending their money, as if that is somehow a belittling exercise on the whole world. Oh, he built an 8,000 crore mansion. How disgusting. Like, really? There were 8,000 crores worth of money that was spent on masons and laborers and some interiors and this and that. Sure, some of this might have been brought from abroad, but a very large majority of it would have happened in India. If they're having a multi-crore wedding, is this a good thing to flash all that wealth? Who cares? It's their wealth. I don't care about their flashiness. The more I care about is that there's some guy who delivered all those flowers to them, and he's probably made a living at that point, or she's made a living at that point. And this is the difference that I have to switch myself into, because as a society we like the rich guy who wears the lungi. Nothing wrong with lungis, but I'm just saying that in general you don't. So you like, he's so humble, he's so right, and all that stuff. Maybe it's true. It's not. I mean, I don't get any greater feeling in my life by wearing smart clothes or those expensive clothes. But I think it's perfectly fine for people to want to do that. But I'll give you an example, and this is maybe weird. There's a person who really likes tennis. Ticket to center court in Wimbledon costs maybe 2,500 to 5,000 pounds per season or something like that. That sounds like 2.5 lakhs to 5 lakh rupees per person. If you're going with your spouse, you're pretty much spending 10 lakhs just for the tickets. Now, this is greater than your Dua Lipa and all of those, tickets that have concerts that have come, which were even at black, not anywhere close to this amount. So you're almost thinking, who in their right mind spends 10 lakh rupees to get tickets to Wimbledon? But a person who really likes tennis and who's had this ambition for years to go there. It's center court down there, out there. We can see the players, sweat trickling from their faces. That is Wimbledon. Otherwise, you could watch it on TV. I mean, if you're going there, you might as well go do the whole hog. And if it's a once in a lifetime experience, well, it's once in a lifetime experience. You should do this. Opening your mind out to saying it's only 10 lakhs, I'll figure out how to get that 10 lakhs, and I'll do it 5 years down the line, not today. I'll do it 5 years or 8 years down the line. And then when you have that 10 or 15 lakhs by the time, I guess it would have become 15 by that time, you won't feel as bad about spending it, because you're like, this is what I earned for in the first place. This is what I wanted to get to. I didn't measure myself as I'm worth 5 crores or I'm worth 10 crores, but I am worth a Wimbledon experience and a car and this and a that, because that's my experiences that I'm going to build with this money. It's just a nicer way to kind of feel about yourself. Now, of course, and then the second part of the question is important, because, and I say this often, life is about joys, not happiness, right? So happiness is a state of mind. Joys are times when your happiness goes up and comes down. So you remember joys when you think back about your life. You'll remember the joyful periods of your life, and the joyful periods are when your baby laughs for the first time, walks for the first time, when you've sometime come back from office really stressed, and your family come and give you a hug, and life became great. You remember this time. They remember the time because these are joys, and all the joys I've just mentioned don't take any money. It's But to a certain extent, there are some joys which do take money. I'm just going to make a differentiation between that. So winning at life does not have to mean anything. In fact, most people um, don't need money to do what they really want to do. So a friend I know who wants to run a shelter for stray dogs, which is, by the way, apparently illegal because there's some Supreme Court ruling that says you can't move stray dogs away from where they are. But I think stray dogs do deserve to be protected away from the roads where they could get run over, and also from where people get intimidated by them and all that. So, but more importantly, he wants to do this. It is not going to cost a hell of a lot of money. So he looks at it. It's not a financial goal for him as much as it is a point in life where he doesn't need the money that he's earning as an income from his job. He doesn't have the trappings of life which involve staying at a place where his kids are close to school, because wherever he stays, he's not going to be able to rent a place that big enough for stray dogs to be. He needs to be in a place somewhere else. So those kind of ambitions are not money driven per se, but they are more about timing and sequencing of things. However, and there are, of course, others. Climb a mountain. Today, to outside Bangalore, there are a bunch of little hills that you can climb. And if you want to climb those hills, you have to go to a website and pay 100 rupees. Yeah, doing that is not going to be expensive. It's not going to change your life to be able to spend 100 rupees just to do this. So it's not always the money. It is a bunch of things that come together. But as much as I've said about this, there are a lot of things that need money. And I think those lot of things are things that will make your life better in different ways. Even for the guy who wants to run a shelter, he wants the amount of money just to be able to say, I don't need a job for my income because the shelter is going to earn me nothing. In fact, the shelter is going to cost some money to run. So can I get some income enough for myself and for my shelter? So what kind of corpus do I need? So it's defining it financially, right? So, MasterCard has a bunch of ads on this theme. So I'll kind of riff on that, and I'll say there are a lot of things money can't buy, and for the rest of it, there's money. So the original was, the rest of it is MasterCard. But and on the other hand, and as much as you said, money can't really fix sadness, though it can make it a lot more pleasurable. For instance, I'm sad that there's a lot of traffic on Bangalore roads. Somebody asked me, Deepak, what difference does it make if you drive a good car versus a entry level car, because you're stuck in the same traffic. That if I'm stuck in the same traffic, I want to be in a car that's more comfortable, that has better AC, that has a better music system, not because of anything else. It's just that, come on, if you're all stuck in the same sadness, you might as well be a little more comfortable, right? But I think the freedom to solve some of these problems comes with some money, with the spare amount of money. And when you have these goals, what happens sometimes, for instance, I want to climb a mountain. I have an accident at some point that makes me hurt my leg so much that I'm not allowed to climb mountains anymore. Is my thing that shit, this was my ambition all my life? I'm going to be like, no, I'm going to change my ambitions now that I can't climb mountains, but there's money available that I saved to climb mountains. I can repurpose it for something else. The sadness is there. I can't take away the sadness. Money will never be able to fix sadness unless the sadness is about not having enough money.
So, Deepak, actually, I think this has finally unlocked, or has been a bit of an aha moment during our conversation. The reason you're forcing me to define what I want the money for, or to describe what my version of the good life or what me winning at life is in this situation, is because you want me to apply my mind to describe what I really want out of life, which is something that I can honestly perhaps have a conversation about. And then we will use that to come at a financial number when saying that, look, for this you need this much, for this you need this much, and hence we need to save this much today. And on the positive side, this can help me unlock that, it only takes this much to do this kind of experience. And so the fact is that it will enable me to think bigger and allow me to get where I want to go. But at the same time, I think you're also then going to be each goal should have a different sort of risk profile associated with it. So if the stock market goes through a 10-year loss decade, it shouldn't be my groceries that I struggle to afford. Maybe it's the ticket or the travel somewhere that should become a bit risky rather than the day-to-day existence. So I completely get that. And I think that has been quite a unlock for me when we've had this conversation. So I'd just like you to maybe talk about that. How do you change, or how do you then think of like distilling these life goals into investment decisions? And the other thing that comes to mind to me is that, look, I completely get it, but on the other hand, I'm also very nervous or apprehensive that if I'm talking to someone, I just won't be like whatever extravagant enough in my planning, because planning will inherently make me conservative. I'll either just not be creative enough, or I'll be too embarrassed to talk about all the crazy things I want to do, and so I'll end up with say life goals that are just too modest, and then the person will invest too conservative, and then it'll be a doom loop. The same way more money could have enabled me to do more things, this will end up making me just say like, sure, all you want is these, not have to pay rent, or just do these groceries and one vacation every year. So it'll end up with, I'll just end up with that much and not more. Isn't it that sometimes the money unlocks stuff as well? So the reason you just want more from your fund manager is because you can be like, oh, now I have this extra thing, so let me figure out what's the best thing I can do with it in the moment.
That's actually two very interesting contrasting points. So let's go with the first part. Okay, it's like, how do I even compartmentalize, or how do I even do this stuff? One of the reasons why I think we should compartmentalize is it because it will leave more for today, and I'll come to why this is important. Let's say I'm 35 years old. Just as an example, this is just an anecdote that I want to just put in. 35 years old today, and there's an ideal holiday I want, which costs 10 lakh rupees. And there's a bunch of ideal holidays that cost 10 lakh rupees today. But I know I can't afford it. I'm probably looking at, I'm earning maybe 2 lakhs or 3 lakhs a month, or whatever that number is. And I want to afford this kind of holiday every year, including inflation elements where the cost becomes more expensive. So it will become 20 lakhs in 15 years. Right? So I'm 35, I have to get to 50, I have to start spending all this stuff. One of the reasons why I can think of this as, oh, this is an extra. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do there. I'm going to just start parking this as a nice to have thing. I did the calculations for doing this for 20 more years. So you'd start at 50, end at 70, 20 years of this 10 lakh rupee per year holiday adjusted to inflation. It'll start with 20 and keep going up, 20 lakhs per year and keep going up. So what kind of money do you need to save? If you have nothing, you can start with, I think it's about 40,000 rupees a month. Then you increase that every year a little bit, and then you'll get there in 15 years. That money will be enough for you to save, to take it for another 20 years. But I'm assuming you keep saving the same amount of money till you retire. However, this is a far more acceptable number than if I told you I need 20 lakhs a year at the time I am 50 years old. Because it's intimidating to say suddenly if I'm earning 20 lakhs a year today, how can I spend 20 lakhs a year on a holiday? It sounds like obscene, right? But my incomes will go up, my savings will go. But 40K a month sounds far more reasonable to achieve the same goal, right? So one is the reason to compartmentalize is, if I were to tell you that was the only goal you had and you were earning 2 lakhs a month, you would be thinking, let me save as much as I can to get there, right? And when you got there, you would be loath to spend it, because the minute you spend it, it's not there, and you have to take it off again. So a better way to do this would be to have compartmentalized it. It's only 40K. Just leave that. Once you've done the 40K, then don't think about it anymore. Because once your future then gets determined by how that 40K kind of grows. And it may actually be a complex situation, because if I planned for too much, if I keep thinking that this money is too much, I will save more than I require to save today. One of the things that does is it hurts your life today. The reason you compartmentalize your savings is not only because you need the money for tomorrow, but you also need the money for today. And it's like, if you get a big bonus today, a financial planner's answer might be save all of it or invest all of it. On the other hand, you might be like, can I not spend all of it? Perhaps you can. I'm not saying you can't. And to be honest, the answer to whether you can or you can't is simply about, has something else changed in your life? Or has a need been created where this money is not going to be enough? Can you then build for that rather? If not, then by all means spend it. That bonus is yours to spend. Go to that 20 lakh holiday today because you got the bonus, right? Everything else is on track. The framework on whether it's extravagant or not is no longer about, what will people think? It is more like, damn, I can afford this. So it's a little bit different from a thought process. And sometimes um, what's extravagant to you in your past, as I've said, can change. But sometimes it's necessity as well. I'll give you an example. I know a TV anchor, and I met her once, and there was a lot of standing. There was an event, and you had to stand on, and she was wearing these what looked like heels to me. They may be blocks heels. I don't know, something like that. And I was like, I was getting tired in my walking shoes and sneakers, right? So I was looking at her and saying, aren't you like tired? You're walking in these heels. She said, no, invest in a good shoe. So she gave, well, she told me some brand called Manolo, Blahnik. I didn't even know those alphabets could be juxtaposed together. But technically, this is apparently very expensive. I looked it up later, one and a half lakh rupees for a shoe. But uh, up 1.5 lakhs rupee for a shoe looks ridiculous if you're used to buying 800 rupee shoes like I was. I've graduated to slightly more than 800, but still 1.5 lakh looks like a lot of money to me. But if it makes her life comfortable, it is completely worth it because she's living her today. I mean, if she ends up with backache because of bad shoes, what is she going to do with a great shoe when she's 55 or 60, right? It's like, come on, you've ruined your today for what is not even a better tomorrow. So because I mean, it's like people tell you to get healthy early because starting to get healthy when you're 50, like I am trying to do, is not a really good idea. The same way, you can't suddenly start living your life when you switch into 50, because you have to practice living your life through your life. That is the concept of winning at life, because it's not the same thing. Of course, the concept can be very different. So for instance, if you're a sportsman, I play squash, and I'm an, let's say, very amateurish, very early stage kind of squash player. So if you give me a racket, I will use it and I will hit the ball. And it looks to me like my racket is decent enough, and it costs maybe 3,000 or 4,000 rupees. But there's rackets that cost 25,000 rupees. I have held such rackets, and I'm like, it doesn't sound very different for me. So why would you pay that much more for a racket? That's because I'm an amateur player. But the guys who really play, they know the difference that a few grams will make when you're playing. The fact that it injures you a little bit lesser, the fact that at certain parts of the range of your shots, you'll be able to get back a shot in, where a regular racket will require extreme amount of precision, whereas this one can handle things in ranges. I think that is differentiation that I was unwilling to concede at the time when I was thinking that this is so expensive. But it's true. And if that is the case, the difference in be having a comfortable racket and not having comfortable racket is 25,000 or 20,000 rupees, right? So is that affordable or is that not affordable? It sounds extravagant, but my funda is this: the comfort is what you look at. I don't want to show off that I have such a great racket. I use it because I use it to play well, or I use it to play. And that is the difference that I'm saying you improve your life today. So when you have this compartmentalization, it actually leaves you the freedom that whatever is left is available to spend regardless, even if it sounds like a silly thing for you in your own head. And I think the problem is that we live our life through experiences that we want to tell other people. And this is, social media has exaggerated this, because everybody on Facebook is happy. Everybody on LinkedIn loves their boss. Everybody in Twitter hates everybody else. So that is the idea is, if you're not, in with that phenomenon, have you really lived? That's the problem that we've come to. But I think this pick or it didn't happen concept is a horrible thing for us. The best holidays are when you felt good, and the only memories that matter are your own. If you went to France, you walked on the streets and you sat in cafes and just ate the right kind of food that you wanted to eat and just watch things. I think that would be a great holiday for someone who likes that kind of stuff. But this is not stuff you're going to go back and they're like, how did you go to the Louvre? Did you see the Mona Lisa? Did you see? Well, no. Then did you even go to France? Come on, what's the point of going there? You could have walked on the streets here, but you can't walk on the streets here, and that's the point. And but anyway, the idea over here is, it may be different from what other people think is good. And when you want to do that, the only reason why that would enable you to do that is when you start thinking of the money as not enabling a holiday that everybody else around you can be proud of you about. It's something that you can be proud of yourself about, and you don't have to tell anybody about these things. This is a slight mixture because it kind of says, well, there's a bunch of things that you can do, and the enabling factor of them is just the money that kind of takes you there.
I'll get to the second part of the question then,
Huh.
which is the opposite just of what I said, which is, what if the ambitions I state are too modest and therefore my fund managers get too conservative, and then I end up with a lower quality of life than I could have had I just been aimed a little higher when I was doing my planning exercise.
Yes, I think that's an interesting point about this. Now, there are certain things that you absolutely can't avoid. Now, those things, I don't think you can even question that you need to get there. So you need to be conservative to a certain extent to get there. And I would argue that if you got more than that, and this happened to me personally, where I invested in our own PMS and we were able to generate, I think, more than 20% annualized
It was a
returns
good 5 years.
even in those 5 years. And I planned for 12. What that gave me was the ability to say, well, you know what, a few months I'm not going to put in any more money because it's already there where it needs to be. I used that money. I don't know. I went to Australia. I went to some other place. I was able to kind of repurpose that money into different forms without needing to take any loans in the first place. And I felt comfortable with that, saying, listen, my goals are on track. Why am I worried about everything else? When the market dips, I would put in more money because I would have got it somewhere else. And that would be also fine. This compartmentalization allowed me to do this change because I had a goal in mind and a certain number of return in mind. Of course, I don't want to restrict the return. So I don't want to tell the fund manager, give me only 9% and the rest is yours. So people, by the way, in India used to do this. Apparently in 1980 something, there was a book by Sucheta Dalal called The Scam. And that in that book, she describes things called PMSs. That time, what was called a PMS was different because this is pre-SEBI. A PMS would be launched by a bank that said, I will give you 12% on your money and I will invest your money into stocks. But any return more than 12%, because stock market sometimes give you 40% return. So if you get more than 12% returns, the bank would somehow appropriate it. So you would get only 12. So also they would try to make sure that if you got 11, they would somehow pad it up to get 12. So it was a very different world, and all those things are probably illegal now to do in the first place. But nobody does that, right? So nobody says, well, give me less returns or cap my return to whatever it is. And we take those risks and say we'll get more. But I don't think that if you take greater amounts of risk, that you will be guaranteed a greater amount of return. That means taking a greater amount of risk does not necessarily mean a greater amount of return, and taking a low risk does not mean a low return.
I think I need you to expand on this a little bit. Why on earth would you even bother taking a higher risk if you can't get a higher return?
No, this is a great point because it's not often understood that sometimes great returns can come at relatively low risks. So let me give you an example. And many times you can do this in different ways. There is a certain amount of risk that you expect when you take a bet, right? But this outsized return, you almost always expect that it takes outsized risk to do this, right? You could invest in let's say a risky set of startups through a VC fund. I'm just giving an example. And if you did that and you tabulated your returns over a 10 or 15 year period, you might find that this is not giving you a net return after all the fees and things that you paid that is greater than even a small cap fund. And in the exchange, you've given up liquidity of maybe 10 years. Saying you can't take your money out before 10 years. And after 10 years, I'm going to give you as much money as you would have got in a small cap fund, where you could have got liquidity for every day of the last 10 years. So you've not taken more risk. You've taken the same amount of risk, but your return is not or in fact, you've taken even more risk because the liquidity wasn't there. And you've got relatively a lower return. So you could take a certain amount of risk and get a lower return than you could have expected for that kind of a risk. On the other hand, there are lots of opportunities where it appears risky, but the actual risk is low compared to the return that you generate on it. So for instance, if you look at certain opportunities that come once in a while in the market, and those opportunities can be, some X amount of things exist, and they should be valued at Y, and they should be valued at Y at certain, but they will be at a certain date. Now, I'm taking a risk that the market doesn't value it at what I think it will be valued at. And then I can make a place a bet, but the return can be magnificent. We've seen this in many cases. In one case, the stock price of a company was lower than the dividend it was going to pay out. And I think we talked about this at that time. There was a company called, I think it was called Majesco, and they had sold their US company, and their US company was pretty much their biggest asset. And their share price was trading at 800 rupees. And the dividend they were likely to pay out was about 1,100 rupees. And the risk was that the managers would siphon it for themselves. Of course, there's a risk in any investment.
Or would choose to reinvest it in something and not pay it out.
Pay it out. The risk also had the problem that if you paid them 800 rupees and got this 1,100 rupees of dividend, you would pay 40% tax, etc., or 35% tax, and therefore the net return might be lower, blah blah blah. So those are the risk factors in this whole thing. But in general, to invest 800 rupees and get 1,100 rupees is a pretty good return on investment. Plus, you own whatever's left for the company by itself. In the end, about 100 rupees was the stock price of the company after this whole dividend was paid and all that. And it got demerged or merged or something like that. But the overall idea was this. This was a relatively big return for the kind of risk involved over here, because you've seen elements of this breakdown, but in general, if you do the assessment, this was not such a risky trade for what was nearly a 40% return. And it's not like it's a small amount of return. Decent amount of return kind of culminated within a year of when we started talking about this. But overall, high returns do not guarantee, high risks do not guarantee high returns, and low risks does not necessarily mean a low return. I think most of us, like somebody asked me once, Deepak, would you invest in your own company? Why? For instance, why would you invest? Why are you investing in your own PMS? Don't you want to diversify? Or why are you invest? Let's say I'm going to invest even more money. If I'm given the opportunity, I will invest more into Capital Mine itself. Liquidity being the main thing. But assuming that that's true, why would I say that? Or assuming that that's what I'll do if I did this, why would I say this? The answer is, if I control a company, or if I'm in control of a company, the risk to me is much lower. I won't ask you to make the same kind of investment in but I would definitely tell you that investing in your own company, in fact, investing in yourself is relatively the lowest risk thing you can do for a ridiculous return that you will get. So if you just stretch this analogy to one side, it's about, if you told me that I have 100,000 rupees where I could go and take a course that will really change the trajectory of what I'm doing, or if I can invest it in stocks, take that trip, change yourself, because the return you'll get on that will be far greater than the 100,000 you'll invest in stocks in the first place. At least my opinion is that. So though it appears that investing in stocks will have lower risk than just giving all the money to a trainer who will give you who might change your life, the return is substantially higher in those circumstances. Yeah.
I think I'll just summarize one of the points you've made, because I think it deserves repeating given just how positive markets have been for so long. High risk doesn't automatically mean high returns, as you pointed out, even if you can wait it out for a long time. Because I'm reminded of the Nasdaq has returned in rupees, I think 100x in from 96 till today. But there was some 13 or 14 year period where it returned zero. And I think the fact of the matter is that you would have probably exited. That's one. And the second one, it sort of came to light when you talked about startups. I think all of us who have had the fortune and misfortune of investing in startups early are familiar with the fact that there is a probability at play here. And this one may or may not work out. And you're kind of hoping that over the next 10, especially if these other people's companies, a couple of them work out and they work out really well. But the fact is, you could have companies that look like a sure thing that don't, and companies that look like they're very dodgy and actually end up doing really well. So I do get the point that risk is that sometimes things won't work out, either when you need it to or at all. And I think that's something we must appreciate, given the fact that right now the advice in life seems to be just buy a few small cap funds and forget about it and come back to your mansion in 10 years or whatever. Deepak, my last two questions, referencing things you've been saying throughout. At one point you said that one of the type of customers we can't really help well is someone who already knows or has already become wealthy enough or saved enough that they really know they don't need any financial planning per se. At some intuitive level, they have enough expenses for retirement, some travel, and they get that. But the more I think about that, the more that's actually not true with us, at least, right? Because many of our customers are people who actually know already before they came to us, or within the first half an hour of meeting you, they realize that they already have enough money for all of life's necessities per se. And we've had the good fortune of having customers who joined us when they had only maybe a few tens of lakhs in their bank accounts, and now they have many tens of crores. And so it's a very different life experience for them. But we're still able to add value to them. So could you help us talk through, if you're a person who already has their, say, necessities covered by virtue of your investments or some inheritance you're going to get or whatever, then how do you invest or spend the rest of your money? What do you do with that?
This is a very interesting and good problem to have, right? First world problems in that sense. So I have enough money. What do I do now? Or do I need to invest it? Do I need to spend it? And too many times you realize at some point that this involves a lot of time to just manage things. Let's say I decided I have a lot of money. I'm going to invest in 50 stocks and 40 other things and mutual funds and PMS and all that stuff. At some layer, there is now going to be my time required to A, meet those people, and B, track their performance. And so I have to be willing to give that much time to be able to do this and to get a meaningful return out of it. At some level, there are enough people who say, well, I don't want enough of this. I don't want that much of this. I want a certain portion of it to give me a decent amount of return. I might spend a bunch of it after that, or I might give it to charity. Charity is like spending in that sense, but I might do different things with it. Now, at some point, when you start to become rich, one of the things that happens is that there's a protectionist feeling. The protectionist feeling is because, in general, what happens is when people used to get rich using, say, they got retired and they got a bunch of money from their pensions and all that, a large amount of money landed up in their bank account. The bank manager calls them, their friends call them, I need some money for this, I need some money for that, I need to borrow it. Then you're not so rich anymore. So there's a protectionist feeling for that money in the first place. That's fair and natural. So there is an aversion to spending it. So this protectionist feeling is it lasts a little bit longer than the point at which you realize that no matter what I do, I'm not going to reach a point where this much money will be spent by me, and I'm just going to keep it. Maybe I'll think about it for the next generation and things like that. Once you realize that your basic needs are being taken care of, and there's a certain amount of money required to get to that basic stage, the stuff beyond it is spendable in that sense. And spending money well is a challenge. It doesn't mean you throw parties every day, because you could throw parties worth 10 crores if you wanted. I mean, literally.
Those people seem to have to run away to London, so maybe that's not a good idea.
Yes,
but
yeah,
anyway,
yeah. I mean, then I'm assuming you have hundreds of crores or thousands of crores to be able to do this. But at some level, you can spend money badly. So, for instance, if I throw a party with hundreds of people whom I don't even know land up, and they all had a great time, but I'm sitting there thinking, what am I doing throwing a party for all of this? This does not sound like it's the greatest thing for me. I wouldn't enjoy it. I'm not that kind of a party guy myself. At some level, spending things life meaningfully for me would be travel, perhaps, or just being able to drive all over India. I just love driving, so I mean, it's or drive anywhere else is a good thing. But to be fair, and there was this guy who was a stand-up comic who actually made this fantastic statement. Define rich was the question an audience member asked him. He said, define rich, if you get a lot of money and you won't change a thing that you're doing, then you're rich. So that means adding more money to this kitty does not change who you are. That's what you rich. The point about this is to get to that phase. It doesn't mean you have to stop working. It means you continue to work at what you really want to build, even though there may be challenging elements in it and days when you feel like, dude, I don't know why I'm doing this. But it gives you meaning. It gives you a life of purpose. I think Taleb said this, though, even though he blocks everybody on Twitter, somewhere he said it outside of Twitter, perhaps, that life is not about finding purpose alone. It is about feeling useful. So you actually have to feel that you have made yourself useful, right? So I think wealth is just that, because it takes away that feeling of, oh, I don't need to be useful anymore. But if I'm not useful, what's the point? But I think you are useful, and at some level, wealth is a social need, but wealth also has the social need to be spent. This is why the richest people in the past, on the more religious network, would sponsor a Ganesha or a festival or something like that. The idea wasn't just to give to charity, but the spending would feed a lot of people who would feel that sense of social togetherness and things like that. Even though you contribute to the same purpose, it is almost like spending, though it sounds like charity, but it makes you feel meaningful because you've contributed in a cause that was somehow justified in your head. I think that has the thing that you can kind of layer this thing on for even for people who are very rich. And once you get to that stage, the most important thing is to get rid of the tiny problems. And when I say this, I know it sounds like stupid for me to say it, but what is 1 lakh for you today? Maybe a meaningless amount of money if you ever get to say 50 crores, right? So often people worry about the 1 lakhs in their lives. When the 1 lakhs in their lives at 50 crores, the same as worrying about 1,000 rupees. This is why you haggle with the vegetable vendor on the street and you don't have a problem paying sticker price for, I don't know, Armanol or any of those.
Yeah.
This thing, you don't have a problem with that, or a Birkin bag or anything like that, because it's just different layers, right? It's just different layers of this whole thing. This worrying about the small things is usually takes away spoons from your life. And there was this whole thing about you start every day with a bunch of spoons, right? And when you reach a certain point in the day, every decision you've made in this point, every fight you've had, every
Use one spoon gone.
one spoon gone. So at some point you run out of spoons. Then you have to just wait for the next day. You don't want to run out of spoons because at some point you don't want to be in a point where you're making so many decisions in your life that you're running out of spoons by 12 in the afternoon. And then the rest of the day, you're almost like, dude, I'm just so tired. And that's not wealthy from a experience and life perspective. It's just that. So you want, as your wealth increases, for this number of spoons you use per day to go down, not up, right? So you want your life to be happy. And this does not always takes money. It takes a change in mindset. And that change in mindset sometimes is be content with less. When I say less, I mean sometimes it's be content with less returns as well. Give me treasury bills, even though they will give me only 5% or 6% return, because I don't have to worry that this company will go bankrupt. I think it's perfectly fine. Reason why a lot of the wealth of very wealthy people is parked in US treasury bills, in not so much in Indian right now, but in relatively speaking, there will be a time when India will be wealthy enough to have that as well. So the choice of that is where I think your financial life also goes down.
I think I would just like to add to that. I'm thinking through because I've interacted with many of these customers myself. And I think the answer to this is, I think almost everyone gets it right that they keep for all their necessities or a very extravagant version of necessities, they ensure that money is well safely invested in a diversified basket of either stocks or mutual funds or something, and that there's enough emergency fund and real estate and there are no loans, all that good stuff. And with the balance, I guess that balance could itself be a very large number if you're a very wealthy person. With the balance, I think the challenge becomes how much of your self-worth is associated with being good at money or being good at making decisions or being very smart about it. If it is, and if you get some of your level of like day-to-day intellectual satisfaction from, look, I did this job well, then make a framework, figure out how to evaluate yourself and go to town. And hopefully you can beat any single benchmark you set for yourself. But if not, then probably just invest the rest of that also the way you've invested the first half, because it's actually not what you care about. So I'd like to end with the last question. You guys have picked for the mutual fund the tagline "Win at Life," and we've been referencing this. I certainly get like why winning at life requires you to think deeply about literally what you want out of it and what are the experiences you want. Completely agree on that one. How is that helpful for a mutual fund?
This is actually debatable because like is winning at life about money itself? But I don't think this is about money. This is about the kind of feeling we want our customers to have, is that at some point they're getting to a stage when they're winning at life. This may not even require money, but it just needs a change in mindset. And it's overall, I think, a better thing for both our investors and overall society as a whole if people find the meaning in their lives, whether or not it requires money. And one of the things that what I've discussed here is sometimes we discourage ourselves from spending because we've been traditionally used to not spending. We used to being told you should need to save money, you don't need garish displays of wealth. But it's not garish to display that you have a certain amount of money that allows you to travel to a certain place. Because earlier it was, oh, foreign trip. He's gone on a foreign trip. That's a big thing. Now going on a foreign trip is no longer meaningful, to the point where some countries even have said, "Come here, we don't even need a visa."
I mean, it's also cheaper than Goa, so
Well, sometimes, yeah, that's the unfortunate part of it because I like Goa, but I have chosen to go somewhere else because it was so financially attractive. But more importantly, I think if you build a framework and think about these things, these extras that you think of as nice to haves, and oh yeah, I could live my life without them. They're great to haves, and perhaps when you think back about life, they'll have been must have. Saying, if I did not do this in my 30s, my 40s, and my 50s, I don't think I'll derive the same kind of enjoyment when I'm in my 60s and 70s. This excessive saving feeling is sometimes what you can detract from your life. And I think that is the point I want to attract, because I've had very little in my life earlier. And I mean, I'm not saying I've come from, like, I didn't
very
draw water
difficult.
from
Yeah.
wells and all that stuff. But I wasn't also at a point where I could, be an extravagant spender in any meaningful way. I think one of the things that, the thought process around this was, if you get an income source that comes out of the ordinary, it helps you plan out and justify things that you would have otherwise not bought. I bought a TV at some point that is way more expensive than perhaps all the other TVs I bought. And one of the reasons why somehow that was there is because I got a sudden income from outside, which was somehow kind of was paying for that TV in the first place. So I justified it as I didn't expect this money to come in, and therefore I'm going to spend it on this TV. And so this TV is kind of like free for me in that sense. But to be honest, I shouldn't have even thought that way. It should have been like, listen, I did my framework. It's no big deal to have this expense now. Even if this other money had not come in, it would still be fine to do this, because I had to just get over that mindset block. I think winning at life is, in a sense, getting over that mindset lock that somehow all the things that make you want to have won at life somehow feel like they are illegal or bad. It's
Or
like
in the future.
in the future. It's like, the biryanis and the sugars. Of course, they're unhealthy. But so there's a feeling that anything good that you like to taste is somehow bad for you in health, right? So it's somehow anything that feels good in terms of which costs a little bit of money more than you thought is somehow bad for your financial health in that sense. And the downstream impact is that when you have more people who are happy, who spend, who spend, who living a better life, it's actually happy for the economy as a whole. Your friendships, it's a lot more interesting when money is no longer an object of comparison or dissatisfaction, but it's more an enabler to generate more experiences. One of the customers we have in the PMS was told me that I'm taking out so much money because I want to fly business class to Australia. I loved it. Even though as a fund manager, you should be thinking, if he's taking out money from us, that means the AUM is coming down and my fees are coming down and all that. But I was like, no, this is more
point.
important. And he told me this, Deepak, it's because of you that I started thinking this way. I would have never traveled business class to Australia on my own. But now I see what you're saying is there is and I can afford it. I know I can afford it. So that's why it makes a difference. And I'm perfectly fine. I think this is the greatest thing ever because you've enabled one happiness that the person did not even think about before he had met you. And now he's actually able to reach that point. And I think that kind of greatness of feeling is as something to aspire for. So the win at life concept is not for us to say, oh, you will save with us and no, it's not the point. It's the point is, if I am able to help you change your mindset to say that you can win at life no matter what you are, and if you're not winning at life today, you can win at life tomorrow. But I want you to win at life today and tomorrow, as a goal, as a thought process that the company thinks about. That I think is the things that changes your things. Yes, you should invest. Yes, you should save, but you should also keep in mind that the end goal is to be happy and, in that sense, comfortable in your life. and that money is just an enabler of those comforts. So we want you to focus on the comforts that will make you happy rather than just the money itself.
And hopefully we can handle all the enabling.
Hopefully we can.
Thanks, Deepak.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully. Past performance may or may not be sustained in future and is not a guarantee of any future returns.